All right, back to the politics of what we need to talk about today. Jim Chalmers, Anthony Albanese, desperately trying to pull together the next budget if it is to be delivered before the election, but certainly looking at 40 budget deficits in a row for the next couple of generations. They know that their promise to make everything better, which made everything worse, has failed, and they know that there are young voters in particular who are starting to drift towards the Greens and will send their preferences to Labor as opposed to the other way around. You see, Labor loves the idea of the Greens being able to hoover up the preferences of the right-on crowd. It's just they can get no more votes in the Labor Party because then the Labor Party becomes the preference siphon for the Greens. Well, you may well have heard today about Jim Chalmers running around and playing to headlines like this, that Jim Chalmers is going to make it easier for people to buy a home, particularly as a way of winning over young voters to make sure they vote Labor, not Green. Now, I have said many times before, and well before this election year, that there are people that are willing to vote for parties they have never voted before if they think that they are going to create a better scenario so their kids and grandkids can buy a house. But as always, the devil is in the detail. And I don't think there's going to be that many people that will be advantaged by the new changes which have been announced today, explained here by a nice reporter from Channel 9.
Australia's financial regulators, APRA and ASIC, have both agreed to adjust the rules. That means banks will no longer need to consider university debt repayments if they believe the potential buyer can pay it off. According to mortgage broker Pure Finance, if you're earning $100,000, you can borrow up to $608,000. But if you have a student debt, you'd be paying off at least $5,500 a year, and that reduces your borrowing power by nearly $70,000.
Now, important to note there, the $100,000 earning university student. Now, it is going to take a very long time for most people who leave university to actually start earning $100,000. So think of, firstly, the total number of people with university debt in Australia. Small number. Not insignificant, but a small number. Then think about the number who'll be earning $100,000, even smaller. Then think about the people who, after earning between $50,000 and $100,000, may well have already paid off their HECS debt. It's an even smaller slice. But it's a big enough slice for the banking organisations to say, OK, you're the government. It's not really that much money. It's not that many customers, so we'll go along with you here. But let's actually have a look at the reality of the property market in Australia. When it comes to the houses that are available right now, data available towards the end of last year that has not been updated, tells us that the median house price for the person who would get a $608,000 loan for their $100,000, or if they are still being charged the HECS stuff, $538,000, well, it wouldn't touch the size. You couldn't buy a house, even a third of one in Sydney, half of one in Melbourne, or a little over half of one in Brisbane. A little better in other capitals, but these are the three main places of population. What about a unit? They wouldn't be able to afford one in Sydney. They might be able to squeeze one out in Melbourne, and it'll be very line ball in Brisbane. So exactly how many people are we talking about here who are going to be earning $100,000, and how much will they be able to maximum be able to borrow, and how does that match up with the numbers that I've just shown you?
Banks will no longer need to consider university debt repayments if they believe the potential buyer can pay it off.
4/5 bugger all. Now, yes, anything that moves the ball 1 inch further down the field is a win, but let's not pretend that this is the solution to the problem. It is a government trying to say it has a solution to the problem. Oh, yeah. And as for the rest of the almost half of the country that is trying to pay a house off that either they live in or it is an investment property with a mortgage, we learn today about home loan sizes that have now hit new records in Australia. The average home loan in Australia is now $666,000. In New South Wales, it's $811,000. In Victoria, $632,000. And in Queensland, $635,000. Which brings me back to what way too many people in an oh-so-compliant press gallery think is going to be the get-out-of-jail-free card for Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese, which would be, fingers crossed, a hopeful drop in interest rates, hopefully one next week and potentially one during the federal election campaign. But with the average home loan in the country being $666,000 or New South Wales $811,000, the actual truth of how much more you have had to find to pay off your mortgage since these people became the government is as follows. An extra $15,000 if you borrowed $400,000, $22,000 if you borrowed $600,000, $29,000 if you borrowed for the average joint and the average mortgage in New South Wales. Even higher, if you've got a $1 million loan, under this government, on top of what you were already paying, you've had to find $37,500 more to pay off your loan. And if you've got a very big loan, because presumably you've got big money coming in, you've had even bigger money going out. Somewhere between $14,000 and $44,000 extra. And yes, if there is an interest rate rise, there may well be a grand $150 reduction in your monthly repayments. If anyone thinks that the Australian people will just forgive and forget a government that has presided over those numbers times 2 years, because that's how long it's been, back, of course, into the latter part of 2022, the early part of 2023, when rates hit their high point. So all of those numbers I just showed you, double them, and that's how much extra since this mob came to power. Good luck. Good luck telling everyone that we've turned the corner and everything's okay. They have already had to spend, for some people, close to half or maybe even more of a year's wages to try to desperately keep a roof over their head. Because fingers crossed, eventually the joint will be worth more than what they paid for it. They pay property kaplunk, and what's left over, that pays for their retirement.